While White House executive orders target traditional energy, artificial intelligence is creating an unprecedented power challenge. Data centers are consuming electricity at historic rates, and renewable energy is getting cheaper by the day. So today we're going to follow the intersection between AI policy, power demand, and political reality. We're going to get into that and more right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Thank you so much for joining us today. My guest in the studio is Chris Leslie, Executive Chairman of Real Assets at Macquarie Asset Management. Chris, nice to have you here with me.
Great to be here, Anthony.
Great to be with you as well. You know, this story of renewable energy at this time in our kind of current State of the Union, we know that the White House has been sort of targeting renewable energy, and I think everyone expected that. But let me back up with you for a moment, because there is this very driving and growing demand for renewables. Many of our viewers know that we've talked about this within the concept of artificial intelligence and everything. What are you seeing when it comes to that high demand for renewable energy right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one point is it's a noisy time. So you'd be forgiven for, not being able to detect the signal amongst the noise right now. But it's true around the world that electricity demand is surging. There are a number of factors driving this. Simple demographics. There are more people on Earth, requiring more energy. They tend to generally be getting richer. And if you were to imagine that, everybody became middle class around the world in terms of their spending power, that would triple the demand for energy around the world. So just simple demographics is a really fundamental underlying driver of energy demand. Then, of course, we have digitalization. We all have not just one device, often multiple devices in our pockets, recording videos, taking photographs, doing work. And, this digitalization trend is driving what you mentioned in the outset there, tremendous demand for data centers. That processing, AI, obviously more or less came from nowhere in the last couple of years and has exponentially changed the demand for electricity at data centers. You can see here on the chart we've got on the screen this kind of upward sloping line in terms of global energy use, and renewables is taking an increasing share of that around the world, and we expect that to continue. I think what's interesting about AI is it's kind of taken the industry by surprise. Okay, it really only emerged recently. And if we just focus on the US for a moment, energy demand in the US has been pretty flat, really, for the last 20 years. And suddenly AI demand pops up, and there's a real crunch in terms of how are we going to supply that, what sources of electricity generation are we going to use. And, three things come into focus. There's obviously, the reliability of that energy, the affordability of the energy, and the sustainability of the energy. So those sort of factors are what come into play.
Right. It sort of almost feels sometimes fruitless to kind of talk about the executive orders that are coming out of the White House. And I only say that because so much changes every single day with executive orders and the impact of them. But we know for sure that renewable energy has been kind of attacked by some on the right, especially in the Trump administration, and they're looking more at traditional resources like oil and natural gas, et cetera. Putting that aside, though, what is the potential impact of the White House executive orders on the renewable space? Because as we saw in that chart, the prediction is that the need for it and the demand is going to grow exponentially over the next 10 years.
No, exactly. Well, I think what I would encourage your viewers to do is sort of ignore the headlines, look at some of the detail, because when you pass through these orders, we don't think there'll be a significant impact on renewable energy. So they're obviously focused on the US, and the US is an important market in the world, but obviously there's the rest of the world as well, or most of the world, still proceeding on a renewable path. But if we just focus on the US for the moment, which obviously is going to be of concern to people, the principal targets of the executive orders have been offshore wind. So the president, has plainly targeted offshore wind as an area for concern. That's, not an area that has been all that developed in the US to date. And so, yes, it will have some impact going forward, but for the time being, it doesn't have a big impact. And EVs, has tended to be a bit of a focus where I think the Republicans are seeking to really bring the balance back to EVs versus conventional vehicles. But renewables are established. They've been around for 20 years. They're actually competitive without subsidy. And so it's more a question of how we're going to get all this energy built,
Right.
how are we going to satisfy this demand, rather than question of sources. Our view generally is, wind plus solar plus gas is going to be the solution for the foreseeable future in terms of delivering on cost and reliability. And over time, we expect technologies like batteries and maybe nuclear at the margin will fill some of the gaps.
Right. And you mentioned data centers at the top of the show, and obviously with the AI revolution and evolution, and we'll get into DeepSeek in just a moment, we know that demand is already increasing and will continue to for all types of energy, and the costs of which, and there's certainly an investment case in there as well, which I want to ask you about in a moment. But just given the DeepSeek phenomenon that just happened very recently, where we as a collective international community see that you can have AI and generative AI and machine learning and large language models that require less energy.
Yep.
Talk about revolutionizing the whole concept of what AI is. How does that play into what you're seeing when it comes to the use of energy if we see other AI models start to model themselves after what DeepSeek has already done?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously the knee-jerk reaction from the energy industry was, wow, this is going to drop energy demand. And so you saw a lot of energy stocks tank on the news. We've obviously seen, we're sitting here in February 2024, we've seen a rebound away from that. When we think about AI, I think the important takeaway from DeepSeek is AI just got cheaper, okay? The principal cost of data centers and AI in general is electricity. Okay, so if you've got a model that uses less electricity, you're obviously going to have a lower cost product. Mm-hmm. And with a lower cost product, you move into a world where, well, actually, maybe AI is now cost competitive for a wide range of applications. So yes, at a headline level, the energy demand goes down, but we expect the adoption of AI to be far more widespread, and that will drive energy demand back up. Will it go back up to where it was? Perhaps. Will it exceed? Perhaps. But the idea that energy demand has gone away is not really the conclusion to draw here. Mm-hmm. I think the conclusion to draw is more along the lines of, AI has become commoditized. The margins of the chat GPTs of the world have been significantly reduced.
That's right.
But the need for energy really hasn't gone away.
Yeah. What I find fascinating also is there's this sort of conversation happening where AI will require more energy, but on the flip side of that, energy could potentially become more efficient with AI kind of helping it along to figure out where those efficiencies lie. Right. So it really is kind of like a perfect yin and yang, AI and renewables working both ways for each other. It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting observation. What we're seeing at the moment is these data centers being dropped into communities, in effect, and sucking all the energy out of those communities, potentially increasing costs to customers, mm-hmm. and utilities working hard to figure out, should our residential customers bear that cost, or should we somehow work something out with the data center that they should pay the cost? Of course, the data centers now being cost conscious don't necessarily want to bear those costs. So this tension is playing out, and newer technologies are sort of emerging to potentially provide some of these solutions. So batteries, behind the meter batteries at data centers, dealing with those peak loads for data centers, allowing a more effective way of cost sharing. Nuclear rose up from the ashes, so to speak, recently as a potential solution. But actually, as we can see from the chart that we'll put up on the screen, nuclear is actually pretty expensive. Okay, the advantage of renewables is they are very low cost, mm-hmm. and the cost is expected to decrease. The cost of batteries is coming down. The challenge renewables are facing for the time being, obviously, is reliability, right? Data centers need 24/7, 365 power.
That's right.
Literally, they can tolerate about 5 minutes a year of outage, right? You want your Uber app to respond 24/7.
And when it's hot in the summertime, people want their air conditioning to work.
Exactly. So
well, where do you see the investment case then, Chris? Given you just mentioned nuclear as a more costly type of energy, production. Yeah. Where do you see the investment case? What is Macquarie's thoughts on with this space?
Yeah. So if we sort of tie these threads together, AI has become cheaper. They're going to want cheaper power. What is the cheapest source of power? It's actually renewables. But renewables isn't quite as reliable as we would want just yet. So for the time being, next 10, 20 years, wind, solar, gas provide the reliability and the lowest cost solution. There'll be some opportunities in nuclear, we expect, but ultimately it doesn't meet the cost test. So we think renewables is a key part of the equation and will only get stronger.
Right. And we are seeing, obviously, with AI growing and learning on its own, that it could potentially improve the energy infrastructure predictability, which down the road, just even probably a short amount of time, will help with efficiencies within the energy demand space. So it's a fascinating story that's ever growing.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, when you think about the AI story, until DeepSeek came along, the solution was we've got to spend lots of money, we've got to expand the grid, we've got to build a lot more power generation and data centers and so forth. That was the kind of almost shocking reality. And suddenly the models became more efficient, and that was the solution. So these kind of solutions will emerge again in the future, no doubt.
And who knows what the future will bring. And by future, I mean a week from now. Everything could change in such a short amount of time. Chris, thanks for joining us. Great conversation. Good story, very compelling. And I know a lot of our viewers are really interested in this energy and AI space. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Andrew.
Great to see you. Chris Leslie from Macquarie Asset Management. And for more information on everything coming out of our partners like Macquarie and others, including our Chief Investment Office here at UBS, visit our Insights website at ubs.com/views. Plus, you can follow UBS on social media. We're on all the big platforms, including Instagram. Follow us at UBS Trending. Lots of studios content there for you to take a look at. And as always, if you have any questions about what Chris and I spoke about today, make sure you're chatting with your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon.